Welcome the Lord's chosen. Fear only survives where understanding refuses to show up. There is a strange pattern no one talks about. The louder the threat, the quieter the outcome. For centuries, stories of invisible forces, whispered rituals, and so-called death spells have traveled faster than truth itself. Yet here you are, breathing, thinking, watching, completely alive, which already disrupts the narrative. Here's a grounded fact that rarely makes it into dramatic conversations. Across psychology, anthropology, and even neuroscience, fear-based belief systems only demonstrate influence when the person targeted internalizes the threat. The mind reacts first, the body follows, and when nothing is accepted internally, nothing manifests externally. That's not mysticism. That's how the nervous system works. What keeps this topic fascinating is not whether people attempt rituals. Humans have always performed symbolic acts to feel control. What's fascinating is how often those acts fail when faced with someone who doesn't collapse inward. If spells worked the way stories claim, history would look very different. Graveyards would be full of the calm and confident. Instead, it's usually the anxious and already exhausted who fall apart. And even then, not because of magic, but because pressure finally finds a weak seam. There's also a quiet irony here. People who claim supreme spiritual power often spend an impressive amount of time explaining why it didn't work. That alone should raise an eyebrow, or at least a smirk. Real power doesn't send press releases. So this isn't about mocking beliefs or playing spiritual hero. It's about exposing why some of you are still standing while the warnings kept coming, why threats turned into noise, why the script failed, and why clarity, not fear, ended up being the most inconvenient obstacle to superstition. Stay with this, because once you see what actually keeps people untouched, you'll never look at spiritual intimidation the same way again. Number 1, you're still alive because belief fuels fear, not reality. Fear is not a force that attacks from the outside. It is something that grows when the mind agrees to host it. That's the part many people avoid admitting because it takes responsibility away from the story and puts it back on the individual. Belief is the engine. Fear is the smoke. Without belief, fear has nothing to burn. Most threats that claim power over life depend on one quiet condition. The target must accept the idea that they are vulnerable. Once that idea settles in, the body reacts. Sleep changes, stress hormones rise, judgment weakens. From the outside, it looks like something invisible is working. In truth, the body is responding exactly as it was designed to respond to sustained fear. Nothing mystical is required. Reality is far less dramatic than the stories people tell. If belief alone could cause death, hospitals would be unnecessary and panic would be lethal on sight. Yet millions of people live through intense fear every day and continue functioning. What separates those who break down from those who don't is not protection charms or secret knowledge. It's whether fear is treated as information or as a verdict. When someone believes a threat has absolute power, they start surrendering small pieces of control. They stop trusting their own stability. They hand over authority to an idea. That slow surrender does more damage than any ritual ever could. Fear doesn't strike all at once. It leaks into thinking, habits, and confidence until exhaustion does the rest. On the other hand, when belief is absent, fear struggles to take shape. The mind doesn't build a narrative around danger, so the body stays grounded. Stress passes instead of nesting. Life continues. That's why many people outlive threats that were supposed to end them. Nothing attached. Nothing stayed. This is not about being brave or pretending danger doesn't exist. It's about refusing to inflate fear into something it isn't. Reality operates on cause and effect, not intimidation. When belief withdraws, fear collapses back into noise. And when fear collapses, all that remains is a person still standing, wondering why something that sounded so powerful never showed up at all. Number 2, no external force can override a mind that refuses surrender. Most people think danger comes from outside themselves, but the truth is far simpler and far more powerful. Nothing can touch you without permission. The mind is the gatekeeper, and if it refuses to hand over control, the strongest rituals, curses, or attacks are powerless. What looks like magic or malevolence only works when the target's attention and belief feed it. Remove that consent, and the threat collapses. When someone stands firm mentally, fear cannot lodge itself. It has nowhere to grow. This is why so many attacked individuals live on unaffected, while others crumble over the same stories. Strength isn't about mystical shields or secret words. It's about clarity and refusal to be manipulated. Once the mind rejects the premise that it can be harmed in ways beyond the natural, the supposed danger stops being real. It still exists in stories, in whispers, in dramatic warnings, but it doesn't exist in effect. The surprising part is that most people don't realize how much authority they hold over their own experience. Every time anxiety spikes over an unseen threat, it's because attention has been misdirected and power handed away. A mind that refuses surrender operates like a fortress without gates. Attempts to breach it fail silently, leaving the attacker frustrated and the victim unharmed. The world can throw chaos, pressure, or superstition at you endlessly, but as long as you don't buy in, it passes like wind against stone. This principle doesn't require bravery in the heroic sense. It requires awareness. Awareness sees a threat for what it is, recognizes where influence ends, and refuses to act out of panic. That refusal is invisible to others, yet it is the most effective defense imaginable. History is filled with examples. People who should have succumbed according to rumor or fear, yet they thrived simply because they never allowed the narrative to claim them. Understanding this flips the story entirely. It removes the illusion of external power. Nothing can dominate a mind that won't cooperate. The real strength isn't hidden in spells or protection rituals. It is in the unshakable clarity and conscious choice to remain sovereign over your own reality. That alone makes you untouchable. Number 3, many who fell were already fractured long before anything external. The people who panic at the idea of death spells often overlook a simple truth. Collapse almost always starts from within. It's rarely the invisible forces, the whispers, or the rituals themselves that cause breakdowns. The cracks are already there, running deep, often ignored until fear pours in and illuminates them. Belief in external danger becomes a convenient explanation, a story to hide the uncomfortable fact that vulnerability existed long before any spell was cast. Emotional fragility, unresolved trauma, and constant self-doubt create a fertile ground for fear. When someone announces a threat, these pre-existing weaknesses amplify it. The mind interprets anxiety as evidence of danger, and suddenly what was once manageable turns into catastrophic panic. It isn't magic doing the damage. It's the human mind reacting to stress it has never learned to regulate. The story of an attack gives shape to an internal collapse, but it is never the cause. This is why the same spells, warnings, or threats can touch some people and completely miss others. Survival isn't about mysticism or supernatural favor. It's about the strength, clarity, and cohesion of the individual's inner foundation. Those who have spent time facing their own fears, understanding their emotions, and developing mental resilience rarely fall for the illusion of danger. They remain steady because nothing external can exploit weaknesses that no longer exist. Many who fell weren't victims of someone else's power. They were victims of their own unresolved chaos. Belief acted as a magnifying lens, making ordinary fear seem lethal. Meanwhile, those who had nurtured composure and self-awareness survived the exact same circumstances with barely a scratch. This is a lesson rarely acknowledged because it challenges the comforting myth that threats are always external. The truth is harsher. Vulnerability is largely self-created, and protection begins inside, not outside. Understanding this flips the perspective entirely. What seems like an attack is often a mirror, showing where work needs to be done within. Once that work is done, external warnings lose their weight, and survival becomes inevitable. The fracture that once invited panic simply isn't there anymore, and the person stands firm, untouched, proving that inner strength always outlives fear. Number 4. Survival exposes the exaggeration behind spiritual threats. The moment you realize you are still standing after threats, warnings, and rituals aimed at you, the illusion starts to crumble. Survival itself is the loudest argument against fear-based narratives. People spend so much time dramatizing what could happen, inflating danger into something mythical, but the fact that you are alive proves just how overblown it all was. The universe, life, or reality doesn't conspire to punish you because someone whispered a spell. It operates on principles far simpler and far more indifferent than superstition. What's striking is how easily these stories take hold. The more dramatic the narrative, the more people are willing to surrender their clarity to it. Death spells are powerful in rumor, terrifying in gossip, but powerless in practice. The body doesn't respond to magic, it responds to belief, stress, and attention. When those aren't given, nothing happens. What remains is the person who refuses to hand over their authority, who refuses to inflate fear into action, standing calm while the noise rages around them. This is why survival feels almost like proof. Every day you breathe, work, think, and move forward, you are demonstrating that the stories were never stronger than your presence. Nothing external holds the power to undo someone grounded in themselves. Threats are only as real as the attention they are given, and exaggeration feeds on that attention. Once you stop paying, they vanish quietly, leaving only the narrative behind. Exaggeration thrives on imagination and surrender, not reality. People want to believe in drama because it gives life meaning, control, or explanation when they feel powerless. But the truth is harsher and simpler. Power is in living clearly, without giving energy to invisible narratives. Survival proves that most warnings are noise, a testing of boundaries, or a reflection of fear, not an absolute law of life or death. Standing alive, unshaken, exposes the gap between story and reality. It's a reminder that the most terrifying threats often exist only in the mind of those who believe them, and nothing outside can impose where consent and attention are absent. Number 5. A stable nervous system is stronger than any ritual. Most people look for protection in spells, charms, or rituals, but the real shield has always been biological and psychological. The body responds to threats first, not the world outside. If your nervous system is calm, grounded, and regulated, no external attempt to harm you, whether whispered words, rituals, or warnings, can take root. Stability in the mind and body creates a natural immunity to fear-based manipulation. When someone is agitated, anxious, or scattered, their system is like dry tinder waiting for a spark. But when you are steady, the same sparks fizzle harmlessly. Think of it as an invisible armor. It isn't flashy, it doesn't require ceremony, and it doesn't announce itself. It simply exists in how your body handles stress, how your mind processes danger, and how your attention chooses what deserves energy. A person with a stable nervous system sees threats for what they are: signals, stories, or distractions. They don't overreact, don't surrender control, and don't hand power to something that isn't real. Calmness becomes contagious internally. Every heartbeat, breath, and thought reinforces the fact that you are untouchable by anything that relies on fear. This stability is rarely understood or appreciated because it's invisible to the outside eye. People chase dramatic forms of protection because they underestimate the quiet, persistent force of composure. Yet it is composure that breaks cycles of panic, stress, and imagined attack. While others are responding to every whisper of danger, a stable person moves through life uninterrupted, almost immune to what should terrify them. The lesson is simple but profound. Rituals cannot teach what your body and mind can learn through practice. Regulation, clarity, and presence form a force stronger than superstition. The nervous system decides whether a threat matters before the mind even gets a vote. When it is stable, nothing external can gain traction. That is why some people weather storms that should have undone them, standing firm while chaos swirls around. True protection is internal, silent, and relentless, and it always outlasts fear, rumor, and ritual combined. Number 6. What's called an attack is often unresolved pressure surfacing. Most people look for external causes when they feel threatened, convinced that someone, somewhere, has directed harm their way. The truth is far simpler and far more revealing. What often feels like an attack is just pressure you've been carrying surfacing in dramatic ways. Life has a way of amplifying unresolved tension, past trauma, and neglected emotions, making ordinary stress feel extraordinary. When fear, anger, or anxiety reach a tipping point, they create a lens through which anything can be interpreted as a threat, even whispers, rumors, or harmless warnings. This is why people can experience the same circumstances very differently. One person will feel cursed, targeted, or under attack, while another moves through the same situation untouched. The difference isn't external magic, it's what each person is carrying internally. Emotional baggage amplifies perception. Anxiety acts like a signal booster, turning small problems into crises and coincidence into conspiracy. In effect, the body and mind create a storm that looks like it came from outside, but the source has always been internal. Understanding this flips the story entirely. The drama, the tension, the sense of being targeted, all point back to unresolved pressure inside. Fear thrives when it has a narrative, and a spiritual attack gives that narrative life. But if you address the pressure at its root, through awareness, self-reflection, or emotional regulation, the storm loses its energy. What once felt unstoppable dissipates. The supposed attacker is revealed as irrelevant, because the real source of danger was always the unprocessed weight you carried yourself. This explains why some people survive repeated attacks unscathed, while others crumble over whispers. It's never about mystical power or supernatural skill. It's about internal equilibrium. The stronger your inner foundation, the less any story can touch you. Attacks only work when pressure has already created cracks, giving fear a place to anchor. Once you take responsibility for your internal landscape, the external narrative loses authority, leaving you free, composed, and untouchable, while chaos rages around you. Number 7. Psychological resilience outperforms superstition every time. People often search for protection in rituals, spells, or charms, believing that outside forces hold the power to determine life or death. The real truth is much simpler and far more reliable. Nothing affects you more than the strength of your mind. Psychological resilience, your ability to stay steady, process stress, and recover from pressure, outperforms superstition every single time. While fear-driven beliefs rely on vulnerability, resilience is built on clarity, self-awareness, and emotional control. It doesn't matter what stories or rituals are directed at you. A resilient mind simply refuses to take them seriously. Resilience isn't about pretending threats don't exist. It's about understanding the difference between what is real and what is imagined. People who survive repeated rumors of attacks or alleged spells aren't lucky. They've cultivated a mental armor that filters illusion from reality. When fear tries to creep in, it hits a mind that doesn't respond with panic, but with calm observation. The body follows the mind. Stress hormones are managed. Judgment stays sharp. Decisions remain grounded. In this state, what could have seemed dangerous becomes nothing more than noise. The power of resilience is subtle, but it is absolute. Rituals can't teach it, threats can't create it, and stories can't dismantle it. It is formed through facing challenges repeatedly, learning to endure uncertainty, and refusing to surrender mental authority to external narratives. People with this strength don't need to announce it, and the attacks aimed at them lose all credibility the moment they encounter someone unshakable. This principle explains why superstition only ever works on the fearful. It thrives in minds that are fragmented, anxious, or easily manipulated. Resilience neutralizes it by refusing participation. The stronger the psychological foundation, the lighter the impact of fear, and the louder the proof that survival depends less on magic or external protection and more on inner mastery. In the end, those who cultivate resilience walk untouched through storms that others believe are lethal, showing that the human mind is the ultimate safeguard, always, relentlessly, and completely. Number 8. You outgrew the frequency where fear-based narratives operate. Some threats seem real only because you are tuned into the wrong frequency. Fear, superstition, and intimidation operate on a wavelength that resonates with anxiety, doubt, and distraction. When the mind, body, and spirit stabilize, that frequency becomes irrelevant. The threats lose their energy because they no longer find an audience inside you. What once sent shivers down your spine now passes unnoticed, like a radio station you no longer tune into. Survival isn't about escaping danger. It's about shifting yourself to a place where it simply cannot reach you. This is why some people crumble under the same circumstances that others navigate effortlessly. The difference isn't luck, it's alignment. Those who remain untouched have moved beyond the resonance of fear. They no longer vibrate in ways that allow threats to grab attention or hold sway. Words, rumors, and supposed rituals have no traction because the internal environment no longer validates them. The more you strengthen awareness, presence, and clarity, the higher the frequency you occupy, and the more disconnected you become from the noise designed to unsettle you. Outgrowing the fear frequency also changes perception. Events that once seemed ominous now appear neutral. Stories of danger are recognized for what they are, attempts to manipulate attention and control belief. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It comes from consistent practice, observation, and refusal to participate in narratives that thrive on panic. It's a quiet, invisible transformation that others may not notice, but its impact is undeniable. The threats lose their edge not because they vanished, but because you no longer engage with them. This principle proves why survival often seems mysterious to outsiders. It isn't magic, protection spells, or hidden powers. It's a conscious evolution of attention and awareness. You have outgrown the signal that fear-based stories rely on. What once held power over you now fizzles instantly. The moment you stop tuning into fear, threats lose their frequency, leaving only clarity, composure, and an untouchable presence that stands firm, regardless of external noise. Number 9. Power seekers rely on intimidation because they lack substance. Many people who claim to wield extraordinary influence, who threaten, warn, or insist they can control life and death, do so because they have nothing real to offer. Their power is a mask for insecurity, a performance designed to make others believe in their authority. True strength doesn't need to scream or manipulate. It exists quietly, confidently, and without announcement. Those who rely on intimidation do so because they know that substance, true competence, clarity, and resilience is invisible and unassailable. Intimidation works only on those who give it energy. Fear becomes the currency, and attention is the fuel. The moment someone refuses to buy into the performance, the illusion crumbles. The supposed power that once demanded respect or obedience is revealed as fragile, hollow, and entirely dependent on consent. Real strength doesn't need consent because it doesn't rely on perception. It simply exists. Those who try to control through fear are projecting weakness, not projecting force. History and observation reveal this pattern repeatedly. Leaders, practitioners, or manipulators who lean on scare tactics rarely endure scrutiny. Their authority evaporates when faced with clarity, resilience, and grounded awareness. The louder the threats, the smaller the foundation. Meanwhile, people who cultivate self-possession, focus, and calmness survive untouched, not because the danger disappears, but because it never had the power to reach them in the first place. This dynamic also explains why intimidation can feel so convincing. Humans are wired to notice danger and respond quickly, which makes fear a powerful tool, but it is always temporary, always dependent on reaction, and never a reflection of actual strength. Substance outlasts showmanship every time. Those who invest in themselves, their clarity, and their resilience stand immune to attempts at domination. Understanding this flips the story completely. What seems terrifying, powerful, or controlling is often empty noise. The person who relies on fear is weak. The person who refuses to surrender attention is untouchable. True power isn't performed. It is lived, quietly, relentlessly, and invisibly, leaving those who chase illusion exposed and those who refuse it standing solid, unshaken, and alive. Number 10. Your awareness interrupted the feedback loop of fear. Fear grows in cycles. One thought triggers another, one worry feeds the next, and soon a storm is raging inside a person who started with a simple unease. This is what people often mistake for external attacks or powerful curses. The energy of fear depends entirely on continuation. If it is allowed to feed itself unchecked, it escalates. But once awareness enters the picture, that cycle breaks. Simply noticing the fear, observing it without judgment, interrupts the feedback loop and stops it from gaining momentum. Survival in many cases isn't about defeating anything outside. It's about refusing to let the internal cycle continue. When awareness is present, fear loses its grip. The body responds differently. Stress hormones don't spike uncontrollably. Thoughts don't spiral into worst-case scenarios. The mind, instead of reinforcing the illusion of danger, becomes a neutral observer. What once felt urgent and overwhelming begins to feel irrelevant. The supposed attack loses all its energy because the engine driving it, the mind's continuous reaction, has been paused. Awareness doesn't create power, it reveals it. It shows that the threats only had influence where attention was surrendered. This interruption of fear is subtle but profound. It doesn't produce drama, doesn't require ritual, and isn't flashy. But it works every time because it addresses the real source of vulnerability, unregulated attention. People who survive repeated warnings or so-called spells are often those who refuse to participate mentally. They recognize the difference between reality and story and act accordingly. The feedback loop of fear depends on participation. Once participation stops, influence evaporates. What this demonstrates is a powerful truth. Danger rarely exists outside the mind in ways that actually matter. Awareness acts like a circuit breaker, stopping the current before it can do damage. The longer one maintains it, the stronger and more automatic it becomes. Eventually, fear can approach, but it bounces off. The person remains grounded, composed, and untouchable. Survival isn't about what's coming from outside. It's about refusing to give life to it inside. Awareness is the ultimate firewall, and once it is cultivated, no whispered story, ritual, or threat can find purchase. Number 11. Survival rewires your authority over meaning itself. The moment you realize that threats, rumors, or so-called spells cannot touch you, something shifts deep inside. Survival isn't just physical, it is psychological and spiritual. Every time you remain standing while others panic, you reclaim authority over your own interpretation of reality. What once seemed threatening no longer dictates how you feel, think, or act. You no longer outsource power to stories, warnings, or superstition. You become the final arbiter of meaning in your own life. This is a subtle, almost invisible form of mastery, but it is far stronger than any ritual or protection charm. Meaning is the currency of influence. Fear works because it convinces people that certain events, words, or actions carry significance beyond their actual power. Once you survive, you see that the meaning others attach to situations is optional. You stop giving consent to these narratives and, in doing so, strip them of impact. The external world remains the same, but your internal interpretation transforms. Survival rewires you to assign significance where it matters and dismiss noise where it doesn't. You become the gatekeeper of reality, not a passive participant. This is why some people weather threats effortlessly while others collapse under the same pressures. It isn't luck, it isn't magical immunity. It is the conscious or unconscious reclamation of meaning. Every time fear approaches, it meets a mind that refuses to validate it. The stories that once seemed dangerous are now neutral. The tension that once controlled decisions is now irrelevant. The individual becomes untouchable because nothing external can impose meaning without consent. This rewiring also reshapes relationships, choices, and perception. You stop overreacting to whispers, rumors, or dramatized warnings. You see through performances of power because you no longer grant them authority. The world becomes transparent, and your position within it unshakable. Survival doesn't just preserve life, it transforms it. It returns the power of interpretation to its rightful owner, you. In that reclamation, you become immune to manipulation, indifferent to superstition, and sovereign over the very narrative of your existence. Number 12. Many practitioners sell certainty to people addicted to explanations. There's a simple reason why death spells and spiritual attacks are so convincing to some. Humans crave certainty in a world that is anything but certain. People who claim to have secret knowledge or supernatural power are often selling reassurance, not results. They package fear into something that appears controllable, providing explanations for the unexplainable. When life feels chaotic, people are drawn to these narratives because they offer a structure, a story, a sense that someone, somewhere has the answer. The irony is that the power of these practitioners rarely comes from anything mystical. It comes from the human desire to outsource responsibility and outsource fear. Addiction to explanations is natural. Life is unpredictable, and the mind craves patterns. Threats that feel invisible or unstoppable are terrifying precisely because they lack clear cause and effect. A practitioner steps in and provides an answer. This is the reason. This is what must be done. Suddenly, chaos is reduced to instructions, fear is given a name, and the feeling of powerlessness is replaced with ritual. It feels like safety, but it's temporary, fragile, and entirely dependent on belief. Once the person stops believing, the illusion vanishes. This dynamic explains why some people fall victim to fear while others remain unaffected under the exact same circumstances. Those who survive often never bought into the narrative fully. They retain clarity, question stories, and refuse to hand over authority over their reality. The practitioner loses relevance because their certainty has no power outside the mind willing to accept it. Fear cannot hold when the foundation of belief isn't there to support it. What is sold as power is usually just a reflection of the client's internal need for certainty, packaged in dramatic language and rituals. The practitioner doesn't create survival or failure, human attention and belief do. Once that attention is reclaimed, the supposed danger evaporates. In the end, those addicted to explanations often find themselves exposed, while those who cultivate awareness, resilience, and personal authority stand untouchable, proving that clarity and sovereignty are far stronger than any promised solution. Number 13. Your existence disproves the myth more loudly than debate ever could. There is a truth so simple it often gets overlooked. Being alive after every warning, every whispered curse, every rumor of attack is the most undeniable proof there is. Arguments, explanations, and debates about whether death spells or spiritual attacks are real pale in comparison to the raw fact of your continued existence. No amount of talk can match the clarity of standing, breathing, and moving through life when others expected you to fall. Your survival is louder than fear, louder than superstition, louder than the stories meant to unsettle you. This is why myths about power and danger thrive. They rely on fear of the unknown, on stories told faster than verification, on the ability to control through imagination. But existence cannot be argued away. Every heartbeat, every breath, every unshaken step is evidence that the supposed forces meant to harm you have no authority, where belief, awareness, and resilience are present. People who experience this often find that the myths lose weight the moment they recognize that survival itself is proof. The narrative shifts, not because someone explains it, but because it cannot be denied. The potency of life as proof also reframes the concept of danger. Those who claim to wield power over you depend on your willingness to accept their version of reality. Your refusal, often unconscious at first, renders their power irrelevant. Myths, rituals, and threats are effective only as long as attention and belief fuel them. Once you remain unaffected, the illusion collapses. The louder the myths try to scream, the quieter your survival responds, and the contrast exposes the weakness behind the performance. Existence is the ultimate argument because it cannot be disputed, manipulated, or taken away by stories. The people who survive while others tremble reveal a hidden principle. The world only has power where you give it. By standing untouched and aware, you disprove every narrative meant to intimidate. Your life becomes living evidence that fear is conditional, authority is internal, and myths only exist for those willing to surrender to them. Nothing spoken, written, or performed can rival the clarity of simply being alive, unshaken and in command of your own reality. Number 14. The real protection was never spiritual armor. It was clarity. People spend lifetimes searching for protection in rituals, charms, and secret knowledge, believing that some external force can guard them against harm. The truth is far simpler and far more powerful. Protection has always been clarity. Clarity of mind, clarity of perception, clarity of understanding about what is real and what is illusion. When you see the world clearly, nothing external can shake you. Threats, warnings, and whispered curses lose their edge because they no longer have a foothold in your awareness. They only work when attention and belief feed them, and clarity cuts both at the source. Clarity doesn't come from magic. It comes from conscious observation, self-possession, and refusal to surrender authority over your own reality. It allows you to recognize the difference between danger and story, between pressure and attack, between what matters and what is noise. Once clarity is present, panic cannot take root, anxiety cannot spiral, and superstition cannot manipulate. The armor is invisible, effortless, and unshakable. It doesn't need ceremony or external validation. It is internal, consistent, and absolute. This is why some people survive what should have destroyed them. It isn't luck, and it isn't intervention. It is the ability to remain grounded in truth while chaos swirls around. Where fear and superstition rely on surrender, clarity relies on observation. Where rituals demand belief, clarity demands nothing. It neutralizes threats not by fighting them, but by refusing to engage them. The world may attempt intimidation, the stories may grow louder, but clarity makes these attempts irrelevant. The ultimate irony is that the protection most sought after externally already exists within. Survival, composure, and resilience are the natural byproducts of seeing clearly and acting from that understanding. Every step, every decision, every unshaken moment proves that the real shield has always been your mind. Clarity is the firewall, the invisible armor, and the undeniable power that renders all external threats powerless. In the end, nothing can touch someone who sees, understands, and refuses to hand over control, because true protection has always been internal, silent, and unstoppable. Conclusion: the truth is undeniable. Nothing outside of you has the power you often fear it holds. Death spells, whispered curses, and threats only exist in the spaces where belief, panic, and surrender take root. Every point we've explored comes back to the same principle. Survival, resilience, and power are always internal, not external. Awareness interrupts the cycles of fear, clarity dissolves illusions, and a mind that refuses to surrender cannot be touched. Your existence alone disproves the myths. Your composure exposes the exaggeration, and your understanding rewires authority over meaning itself. Those who survive aren't lucky. They are awake. They have outgrown the frequencies that fear-based narratives operate on, refused to validate empty intimidation, and cultivated an internal stability far stronger than any ritual could ever provide. Psychological resilience, emotional mastery, and unshakable awareness form the ultimate protection, rendering superstition powerless and threats irrelevant. Real strength is silent, invisible, and relentless. It lives in a mind that refuses to participate in fear, a body that refuses to react unnecessarily, and a spirit that refuses to surrender authority over its own reality. Everything else, stories, warnings, rumors, and spells, are noise. They can never reach someone who refuses to hand over attention and belief. The power of clarity, presence, and self-possession proves that survival isn't about avoiding danger. It's about refusing to give life to it internally. When you stand untouched while chaos rages around you, you embody the ultimate truth. The real armor has always been within, and nothing external can match it. If this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss wisdom that strengthens your mind and spirit. Like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences and share it with someone who needs to realize their own power. Standing firm isn't just survival, it's mastery, and it's time to claim it. Stay blessed always.